All right, joining us now, crew chief of Junior Motorsports number 8 car, Taylor Moyer. Leah Vaughn's boyfriend. I think she's as famous as you on the Dale Jr. download. Welcome to Redhead Racing Radio.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I think Leah's way more famous than I am, and we're both half as famous as our dog. But
oh yes,
just happy to be part of the family.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Like I started working at JRM full time this year. We've got to know each other a little bit, seen around Leah's office and around the hallways, but never got to talk to a crew chief before. So I always think it's so cool when I just get to say something to you. I'm like, oh, that's a crew chief of the 8 car. How cool is that?
Well, yeah, I'm glad I give off that persona because honestly, when I first started my career on a big cup team, I can remember the first crew chief that really gave me the time of day, and he's still a friend and mentor today. And you think we're big, scary people, but we put our pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. So yeah, I'm glad. Talk to me whenever you come to my office, BS, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, you were very scary when I first met you. That's the impression. Who was that crew chief, by the way?
That would be Steve Letarte.
Ah, very cool.
Yeah, so I worked in the chassis shop at Hendrick, and the chassis shop shares a bathroom with the gym. Steve would go down and work out, and I'd be in the chassis shop working, and I'd see this guy, and he's talkative, I'm talkative, and we hit it off, and the rest is history. So
I'm kind of interested in that before we get into their questions. Like, what kind of stuff has he taught you, and what have you learned from him? I don't know, crew chief, racing, just stuff in general.
Yeah, well, he right when I started my career in first major cup team was Hendrick Motorsports, and I started on the design and fabrication side. That's what my background's in. And then there was a point in my life where was kind of getting bored sitting behind a desk just designing race car parts and wanted to get to the track. And when I made that transition, that was the year that Stevie made his announcement that he was retiring. So Dale was driving, Stevie was there, I was their test engineer. So I was so enamored in learning this new skill, I didn't get to learn a ton about his crew chief style or anything other than I knew that the environment on his race team was very laid back. It was a lot of fun to be with those guys, and it just seemed like a fit for me. And I was very disappointed. I was in the trailer that day at the Daytona Speedway test when it had been leaked, and he had to tell us all, and it was sad. So I didn't get a lot of firsthand crew chiefing experience with Stevie. But since knowing Dale, or now having crew chiefing Dale, and listening to some of the stuff he said, and listening to some of the Stevie's podcast, or just interactions between them, I've definitely learned some lessons on, how Stevie handled Dale and Dale handled Stevie, which has certainly helped me when a couple races I get Dale. So yeah, I've learned more people treatment, personality type things. So, but it's been nothing but good lessons. Stevie actually taught me a lot on the personal life side. Stevie has always been pretty smart with his endeavors outside of racing, and I had some interesting stuff going on. I just recently closed my personal business, but I had one for 5 years, and he actually encouraged me to start that. He's like, hey, you can do it on the side. Why not? You're fine. I've got these side gigs. Do it. Have something for yourself to get your mind off racing. And he gave me that kick in the butt to start. And it was a great lesson in life. So that's what I owe to him.
Very cool. So we'll step backwards a little bit. I want to hear how you came from Vermont to UNC Charlotte, then eventually started working at Hendrick at a really young age. Can you kind of walk us through that path, how you got there?
Yeah, I have a funny path, I guess. So I grew up on a big farm. Very proud of that. All my family, both sides, are family farms. And in fact, this is one of my family farms on my mom's side.
Repping them.
Yep. Go pick your own produce at Battleview Orchards, Freehold, New Jersey. But I guess all I'd ever done my whole life was farm. And then my best friend, I'll back up a little bit. When I was very young, before I was born, my dad was actually a crew chief in a local series up there. It's now ACT. It's late models. It was Bush North back then, and they were pretty successful, but he got out of it. So I guess that was in me somewhere. And then growing up on the farm, I had snowmobiles and four-wheelers and dirt bikes, and was always very mechanical. And my best friend started driving, I guess a go-kart, but I didn't really get with him until we started racing mini sprints or micro outlaw cars, 600cc sprint cars. And I just kind of got really involved in helping him fabricating, being at the dirt track every week. You felt like a hero. My mom would write me a note to get out of high school a couple hours early. His dad would roll through the front circle with the race trailer, which was just a gooseneck and a Chevy 2500, and we'd go to the racetrack. My friend was very good. He still is very good. He races a modified now up in Vermont, and that's where I got my start. But simultaneous to that, in my high school, we had engineering classes from the time I was in 9th grade. I guess it was drafting for 9th and 10th, and then a program called pre-engineering and architecture for junior and senior year. So 2.5 hours a day for my whole junior and senior year, I did engineering and architecture type class where we got a bunch of your math and science credit. It was better than just sitting in geometry and sitting in earth science or whatever. So I knew I had a knack for CAD, and I knew that I could take what I drew up in CAD, and then I could go down the hall to my other best friend that worked in the machine shop and have it cut out, and we could put it on the race car, and whoa, this is cool. That's my piece. We didn't buy it. It raced. It didn't break. We won a race with it. And we were all kind of just we didn't know any better, but it was cool. Like if we had an idea, I could draw it up. We could put it on our snowmobiles. It would be cooler than the next kid on the snowmobile trail or whatever. So I knew I wanted to go into some sort of racing, and I looked at I don't know what drew me to NASCAR, because I never worked on the NASCAR, or never worked on an asphalt car in my life. The World Outlaw schedule looked pretty grueling. I wasn't sure how to get my foot in the door, and post-secondary education was important to me. So I got into Clemson, UNC Charlotte, Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech, and I'm actually the first person in my family not to go to Virginia Tech, both sides. Yeah. So, but when I looked at it, I was like, man, it seems like when my dad and I drove down and we toured some race shops, and everybody's like, you got to know somebody, I was like, well, if I go to Virginia Tech and I'm a Hokie, I'm probably going to end up working at a farm or flipping burgers or washing cars to pay my way through college. And then I'll have to 4 years later try to make my connections. If I go to Charlotte, maybe I can just get on a race team as a fabricator, which are skills I have now, work my day job as a fabricator, go to school, and do it all at once. So that's the choice I made. And I literally, the third day of college, went to the motorsports shop, and they have a Legends team there. And the fabrication, I don't mind saying, was atrocious. And I was like, hey, I'll rebuild these cars for you. This is embarrassing. So I rebuilt 2 cars over like a week. And there was a kid there that was working on there used to be a big series called Hooters Pro Cup, which kind of K&N took the place of, which is now ARCA. But there was a nationally syndicated series. The races were on Speed Channel, Hooters Pro Cup. And a kid came to me. He's like, hey, we're looking for somebody of your fabrication skills that's halfway athletic to also do pit stops. And I played 3 sports in high school. I was still in good shape back then. Heck yeah. So every night I get done class, I drive up to China Grove, and this guy took me in with open arms, even though I didn't know much about asphalt racing, named Mike Herman. And we worked on the car. We practiced pit stops. We all rode in the tractor trailer truck together to the races. I mean, Pro Cup was still I think it was $1 million a win if you were the track champ or the season champion. I did that for 1 or 2 years, and then needed to make some more money. And there was a team in Mooresville that, this is odd, but they got a contract from one of the princes in Dubai, the UAE, to build 48 road course stock cars. It's going to be called the Speed Car Series, and it was kind of like a rich person's go-karting league. So there was 4 ex-Formula One drivers, Johnny Herbert, Yana Lacey, I don't remember the other 2, and you would race against those guys, and if you had a couple million, you could buy a car for the year, and you got one blank white race car with a bunch of spare parts, and you race all these Formula One tracks throughout the world. So I joined on to fabricate all those cars. We finished that out. We also had an ARCA team that was kind of the rent-a-ride deal. We had a lot of people that would come to us to run like Daytona or whatever to get approved to run NASCAR trucks or ARCA. Or I'm sorry, NASCAR trucks or Xfinity. It was Bush back then. But did that, and then that started to fizzle out. And through a weird chance encounter at my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, I met a gentleman who knew somebody that worked at Hendrick, and they hooked me up with him. I went out to lunch, did a little mini interview before he even turned my resume in. And the only thing open, as far as they could see getting my foot in the door, was there was an open pit crew tryout. And I went and I made a developmental pit crew program. So I still wasn't employed then. I was just contract labor. But it's Hendrick's right near UNC Charlotte. I would just go back and forth all day. Eventually, I was waiting tables and pitting on the weekends, and I was like, I need a little more steady income. And Hendrick had an opening for the parts kid. Like, I was the kid who took parts from Central Parts at Hendrick and delivered paper towels and SD20 and people's uniforms to all the shops. But I figured if I did that, I could meet a lot of people and I could prove to them how hard I work. If I was professional, blah, 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 blah. And it paid off. Maybe a year later, there was an engineering internship open in the chassis shop of Hendrick. And at the time, they were building chassis for everybody. And Rex Stump called me in. He's like, holy cow, you have fabrication experience too. You'll fit right in with these guys. And looking back, that was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. The chassis shop is made up of like a great group of really old school racers. I mean, dudes that worked on teams before there was computers involved and engineers. And luckily, I was just maybe rough enough around the edges that I fit in with those guys. So I could talk the talk and I could use a welder. And I could walk the walk, but I could also do the engineering stuff. And looking back, that was some of the best times of my life. I was young. They hired me full-time when I graduated college. I got to do that. And then they moved me, the body and chassis shop were combined. When it was called the car after the COT, I got to be on the development team for that with Chevrolet. And that went on for a while, and I was a parts designer, and I was just getting a little bit burned out. I was like, man, I don't smell race cars. I don't hear race cars run. I'm not at the track, sitting at my desk. Like, I could design toys and do the same thing. And I went up to, it was Stevie and Chad were the crew chiefs in the 4888 shop. They had a guy vacate, and there was a data acquisition engineer, which was a big position back when there was open testing. So I was like, instrument all the cars, taking a test, make sure all the instrumentation works, be very involved from the crew chief level through the mechanics all the way to the shop level. And I did that for about 3 months. And Chad actually walked in and told my boss at the time, Rex, again, that, hey, I'm going to hire this kid to be like a junior race engineer, but he's still got to do all the data. So I did that, and it worked out. I got to go to a couple races that year as a race engineer. First race ever I got to go to as a race engineer was Jimmy Johnson at Dover. And I was like, we finished second. We didn't win. I was like, man, if I could win my first one ever. But then the next year there was an opening on the 5 team. Keith Rodden had just come with Casey, and I was on the 5 team for 3 years. And then in there towards the end, they switched to Darian as a crew chief. And then we were given William Byron the last year, his rookie year. And then at the end of his rookie year, they made another change, and they went Chad crew chiefing, and I kind of got shuffled out. And I got a call from, Mr. Hendrick and Junior Motorsports said, hey, we think you're halfway decent enough. Let's try this crew chief thing. When I had told some people that was my goal. I actually thought I would fit in better as a crew chief than I would as an engineer. I'm not naturally book smart, and I don't love being behind my computer, and I'm more of a whole car guy and people person. So it's been a challenge for sure. It's not easy, but it is a different set of challenges that I think fit more in my wheelhouse than just being the race engineer like I was on the Cup side. So really enjoyed it so far.
You mentioned kind of briefly right there at the end about how you actually thought you'd fit better as a crew chief than an engineer. And I know a lot of crew chiefs now come from engineering backgrounds, but like, what is like the difference between like a crew chief role and an engineer, like in the responsibilities between the two?
Yeah, I could have never imagined the difference. When I was a race engineer, I'll be the first to say race engineers do they do a lot of the work. They do the very technical, grind out the numbers, run through simulations in the computer, do a lot of organization, get build sheets to the mechanics weeks in ahead. They're getting build sheets out, which is the sheet that tells the mechanics how to assemble the cars, 3 weeks out. So the shop mechanics can be assembling, and then you might make adjustments, and you got to be on track with the crew chief, right? And then you might learn something those couple weeks in between, and then you got to relay those changes to either the shop mechanics or if the car's turned over to your road mechanics when they get back. So I was like, always like, what do the crew chiefs do? And then you get to be a crew chief, and you're like, oh yeah. Some days I would love to be behind my computer, not have to be in meetings and answering questions and doing sponsorship obligations. And crew chief has a lot more personal roles. I mean, you have to worry about a good crew chief, I believe, worries about team dynamic and momentum and points. And, sometimes I have to call a race just to beat another car. Sometimes I have to call a race to go to the win. Sometimes I have to know when I don't have a car to win the race, but I got to maximize points. And that might look as, there's just, you have to be, I feel very blessed in that I never walked into a race engineering role and I had to go through all the steps to get there. So I know what goes on behind the scenes. So something I learned from my dad was, and something I feel I'm very proud of, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but other than probably paint the race car and drive it, there's nothing on that race car I don't have the physical ability to do. I'm not a master of any of the trades, but I don't ever feel shy asking somebody to do something on the car because I know I can just pitch in and help them. Even like fab shop, and it's sad. I try to sneak back there and weld once in a while, or put some rivets in something just because I physically enjoy creating, But I think that goes a long way when you ask somebody to do something. If you ask somebody to do something and then walk back in your office, they probably have a bad attitude. But if you ask somebody to do something and then you'll get them the tools to do it and then be their spare set of hands, they have an appreciation for you. So I hope that goes a long way. I'm glad I had to come up through the ranks like that. Because I've certainly seen the stigma that race engineers get, or engineers in the sport get as a whole, when the sport switched to a very engineering driven sport. People thought they were getting pushed out of jobs, there's whatever. So if you can talk the talk and walk the walk and you bring something of value to other people, then you're much more accepted. The differences, I think, at all different teams are different though. Even the race engineering role at different teams, I know for sure, is a different role. Some teams have a race engineer, which is very much worried about race strategy, which is kind of what my last year at Hendrick I was involved in. And then sometimes there's a sim engineer, which is very worried about just the simulation of the race car and getting the adjustments you make in the computer or whatever put to the track and correlating the two. But those all go mix and match. A lot of times I think the best teams they match the personalities to the skill set and run with it from there. So
yeah, and you mentioned earlier too that like working with Chad Knaus in the 48 car and learning from Steve Letarte, and obviously they have two different styles of how they lead a team. Did you kind of pull certain things and certain skill sets from each one of them and applied it to you? And then like, what are some things that you kind of independently found within yourself and just doing the job?
Yeah, sure. I actually think one of my biggest, so the two crew chiefs I worked underneath as a race engineer very intimately were Keith Rodden and Darian Grubb. And yeah, looking back, there's things I certainly borrow or stole, whatever, what is it? Mockery is the best form of flattery or whatever.
Yeah.
But from some of those guys, and there's also things that I learned that, hey, maybe if I go on to be a crew chief, that's not how I want to run things, for better or worse. I don't think any of them ever had ill intent. You realize you never know what's going on behind the scenes, and people are put in positions sometimes where they lead a certain way, or maybe the team dynamic is such that they lead a certain way. But I knew that it would be the most natural to me to try to lead my team personnel wise, like Stevie Letarte and Darian Grubb, who are both good friends of mine still. And when my last year on the 24 with Darian, I had probably the most fun in racing I had ever had. It was like being out there. It was a young crew. Our average age was like 30. That whole team is still some of my best friends. We are all on different teams now, and we still get together and hang out. We hunt, we BS. We're at Millbridge with a sprint car. Like it was like being paid to be on vacation with your best buddies all the time. We fought like brothers, but we also, it was good. So that was the team that I wanted to try to build that environment at Junior Motorsports. And it's the way that racing works now with contracts, even on mechanic side and stuff. You can't just go cherry pick people you want or anything like that. It takes a couple of years. And I think I was very blessed to walk into a really good team. Kevin Mendering left when he left to go back to Hendrick. He left me with a really good group of guys. Some of my guys from last year moved on to bigger and better things, and I'm proud of them for doing it. And then the team I have this year is just the same way. There's so much fun to be around. We have a mix of we're a pretty young team. We have one older guy, and he's Greg, and he's great. He's like team dad, and he's got permission to smack me in line when we're acting too young or not doing things right. And then we have a young guy, Jack, who was fresh out of college last year, and he now has a really good engineering mentor, Andrew. We got Danny Earnhardt Jr. I mean, the famous Danny Earnhardt Jr. is the car chief. We got Dave Sumner, who was a Cup car chief and longtime Cup guy, tire changer, is now our front end guy, and it's just a blast to be around these guys. In fact, we're going to drive up to Bristol in a big Suburban like we did to Darlington the other weekend, and I can't wait because it's just fun. So I know I didn't answer your question that well. Yeah, some of the like organizational things I certainly picked up from Chad. The way he represented the race car to the sponsors, shirts tucked in, be on time, stuff like that is in my personality wheelhouse as well. So I carry that stuff on. Keith Rodden is an extremely smart guy, very, very, very book smart guy. And, he taught me, whether I liked it or not, he taught me so much along the way. And those are certainly things that keep in the back of my hat or, in my back pocket when I need to. So I learned a little bit, good and bad, the whole way. And I've just tried to do the best job I can with the knowledge I've gained.
So you talked a little bit about that brotherhood with guys on the road, teams on the road. I asked you this earlier today, just see if you have any fun stories of just kind of being on the road with these bunch of guys that you said you were so close with, that you work so closely with during the race weekends. And I've kind of noticed that teams are really close on the road. Like you go race them during the day, then maybe go hang out at night. So I was wondering if there's any good stories you could share with us.
Yeah. So it's the 2018 year with all those guys. We're all the same age, same athletic ability. Which is really cool about that team is we pretty much had the whole U.S. map covered. Tutal was from Arizona. Billy was from Florida. I'm from Vermont. Ox is from North Carolina. Ty's from Indiana, but he lived in Japan. Darian's from Virginia. So we had like this.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool if you would have put it on a map. So a lot of times Saturday afternoons, we would have the afternoon to do something. And we were pretty good group of guys about like we wouldn't just sit in the hotel or go to the bar. We would go do stuff. So in Daytona we would surf. California we carried our mountain bikes everywhere and our shotguns. We would shoot skeet, we would surf, we would mountain bike. On the West Coast swing, we'd stay out, we'd always rent a cabin in Big Bear, California, and we'd snowboard. Moose, our shot guy was from Michigan. Not Michigan, Montana. That's why we called him Moose. So we always had fun stuff going on. So probably one of the, I don't know, it's embarrassing to me, but best stories is I grew up, I could ski when I could walk, switched to snowboarding at 14. We go to Big Bear. It's a small mountain. I'm like, oh, I got this. Me and my little brother had just been in Utah for a week snowboarding like a month prior. Rented a cabin. First day, it's slushy, and I'm just getting antsy. And I'm getting overconfident. we're riding the lift up to the other side of the hill. It's like fourth run of the day, and we're going over the terrain park. And I'm watching people go off like one of the big kickers, like the big, 50-foot kicker or whatever. And they're all coming up short. And I'm like, I'm going to show these guys. This is nothing for me. I've just been in Utah where you land in like 4 feet of powder.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, guys, watch this. And I bomb down the hill, don't check my speed, hit the kicker, hit my mute grab, look down to spot my landing and realize I have overshot the entire jump by 20, 30 feet, and I'm going to flat land. And at that point, I kind of did like the goofy in the air, like rolling the windows down, and I came down, and I just remember in the air thinking I'm going to break my tailbone. Ooh. So I pulled my butt up, and I landed flat on my back, and I knocked the wind out of my, not even to the point where you can make that guttural sound, just the can't do anything. And they skied up, and I'm trying to act tough. Yeah, got it, we're fine. Got to the bottom of the hill, and there's picnic tables, and I took my jacket off, and I laid out on the picnic table. I was like, just let me get my breath back. And I stood up. I just felt all the blood rush out of my face and passed out. And they carried me down to the infirmary or whatever, and that would have been I was 29, and I've skied since I was 4, and I've never ever had to go to like an infirmary or have ski patrol come. And they made me drink a ton of water and pee to make sure there wasn't internal injuries, and they're like, you might have some broken ribs, we don't really know. So a 2-day trip, I ended it in about 2 hours. I had to stay in the cabin the rest of the time. The team manager, Brian Weissel, drove up to the cabin, brought me a bunch of Advil, and got through the California race. And then the 6-hour flight home was just grueling on the airplanes. Yikes. Couldn't sit. And then Hendrick had a team chiropractor. I had to go in every 2 weeks, and then he'd have to. So what I ended up doing was separating the ribs out of my sternum and jamming them into my spine. Oh. Yeah, and since your sternum's all cartilage, there's not many blood vessels. It doesn't heal. So he break them back around every 2 weeks. Finally got better, but that wasn't good. But
That's
yeah,
insane.
we always had fun.
Yeah.
We always had fun. Even on the weekends where there wasn't time to do stuff, we got to where we were saving money by not going out to dinner. We'd all go grab like fast food and then go to somebody's room, grab some drinks, and we'd play cards all night. We played Phase 10. I don't know if you ever heard of Phase 10. We'd played Phase 10 the whole year, at least once a weekend. It was a way for us to just BS, have a great time, laugh, cut up, and not go out and spend a bunch of money and get in trouble. So, yeah.
So, like you mentioned, you overshot it. You had like 20, 30 feet of extra real estate to go through. Like, how much time did you have to like think in the air about like you could just see the ground? You're like, oh,
gonna
great,
crash.
this is like,
Yeah, way too much. Enough that I consciously pulled my butt up so I didn't hit my tailbone. But yeah, I've snowboarded since a couple times.
Okay.
But that was a big one. That was probably my worst wreck. And it was late. It was late spring skiing in California. It was all groomed trails. There's nothing. There's ice and groomers. There's nothing. There's no big powder to land in. So.
And that's good too that you went snowboarding after. Like normally that could like drive people away and like they don't want to do it after that. But I want to jump to, you kind of mentioned how like there's a bond formed between you guys and the team. And one thing that's interesting with the 8 car this year is the only different revolving piece, at least visually, is different drivers that you have to work with. So is it difficult having to work with different personalities throughout the year?
Yeah, it certainly is. More so than I thought it was going to be. And I think that's more so because the drivers that the 8 car gets, because of the business model of the sport, are all in different stages of their career. So, like last year, I had 9 drivers on that car. I had some up and comers: Zane Smith, Sheldon Creed. I had guys that have nothing to prove, Dale. And then I had guys that are up and comers too, that can put enough money together for like a quality car for 10 races, like Jeb. Right. So then this year I got Daniel, who's a phenomenal race car driver, best dude in the world. Obviously whatever happened on the Cup Shuffle, there's only so many rides. He got in our car. And then I've got Jeb again, and I had Dale for 1. So they're all in different stages of their career. They all want different, and they all want to win, but they all want to prove different things. They all have different sponsor obligations. Maybe their sponsors force them into picking a track that's good for their sponsors' sales territory, but it might not be the best track for their skill set, So you're always battling that. And then you battle what those guys have driven in the past. A lot of, like Daniel, for instance, came from RCR, and Jeb's been in RCR stuff. He's been in JGL stuff. He's been in Nice trucks. So some people have this feeling that's very familiar to them, and maybe our stuff drives different. So then there's a learning curve. All right, what does this guy want to feel comfortable? The other thing that was really funny last year, I had Ryan Priest some last year too, was like the octaves of their voice, and how the octaves of their voice and their personality when they give me feedback on the racetrack, learning how much panic in their voice equates to what amount of adjustment. I had Zane Smith, who is the most laid back, talented kid I've ever met. And he'd be like, yeah, I was wrecking loose. I'd be like, you just said it just like that. It's wrecking loose. Like, yeah, I wasn't freaked out. Like, I was like, man, maybe I should have done some more adjustment. Yeah, you probably should, but it's no big deal. You have another guy that's like, this thing's wrecking loose. And you do a half a turn. He's like, now it's plowing tight. And I'm like, well, you're screaming at me. Like, I thought you needed a big, no, it was almost fine. Like, it's just, everybody's a little different, and it takes a little time to learn that. And especially with no practice this year, that every race is another chance to learn. There's not you don't have those practice laps to learn those things about people. So it's been a challenge for sure. But there's also good sides of it. If you have a bad weekend and then you switch drivers, they usually come back refreshed, and you don't have like the bad momentum rolling through. I mean, we've had some absolute crap luck this year. I've never seen a year filled with there's 5 races that if they would have just greened out in the last 3 laps, we'd have 5 more seconds. And then most of those races, I don't think we finished better than 6. Like, we get beat around or get wrecked of no doing of our own, or something happens. So that goes a long way with like team camaraderie. I've been super proud of my team this year, and those guys, they all have their chin up. We've had some terrible runs or good runs and terrible finishes, and they come back to the shop with their head up and then go back to work the next week. So there hasn't been any doom or gloom yet.
Yeah. Congrats though on the second place on Saturday this weekend. That was good. I was like, I told Andrew we should probably wait until there's a good race to ask Taylor to come on, and I was like, this is our opportunity. It was a really good run. JRM swept the weekend, and you finished second on Saturday, so that was good.
Yeah, it was. I was happy for the whole organization. I had a good friend text me that watches all the races. He's like, man, you guys haven't dominated like that in a while. And I was like, well, with the COVID schedule, junior motorsports dominates at short tracks and speedways. Like, you better look out when we get there. Other teams have a better shot at intermediates. So I'm like, the last time we ran a short track was Bristol. And I think that was the second COVID race, maybe. Like, we just haven't been to short tracks. We had all the Iowas were canceled. They pushed a lot of our bread and butter out of the way. So there's a lot of short tracks left in this season. I'm excited for them.
Yeah. All right, one more question for you to end it here. A little fun one. So Leah told me that you happened to attend Chase Elliott's 21st birthday party. And I can only imagine there's good stories that come out of a 21st birthday party, especially someone of Chase's caliber and how fun he seems in talking about that camaraderie of guys on the road too. So I want to know if there's any good stories from that.
Maybe none I can tell.
Give us a little bit.
Well, let's put it this way. Chase turned 21. He was at the Hendrick organization. Mr. Hendrick let us take a plane to Nashville. And we had a private party at a distillery or brewery of some sort, and then we went out on the town, and Jeff Gordon was kind of the leader of all this, and Casey Kane was there, and I do remember this. I remember that our hotel was right downtown, so at any point when you were too tired, you could just go back. And I remember Casey, I remember like leaving to go to the hotel, and it was pouring down rain, and you're kind of running through the streets just to stay out of the rain. And finding Casey in the streets, just completely lost. Like, couldn't figure out his way back to the hotel, rescuing him. But no, it was a good time, for sure. It was a long plane ride back, even though it's only like an hour. But obviously, somebody's 21st birthday, there's usually some adult libations involved, and we partook heavily in that. So,
all right, I like it. I think 21st birthdays always are really fun. So that's
and Jeff Gordon, the ringleader. I don't think I would have expected that.
Yeah, he was the ringleader. Jeff will get down outside of NASCAR.
I like it.
I think he was the babysitter / he's supposed to look after us, but I think he had just as much fun as we all did. So.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Taylor, for coming on the show. I learned we haven't talked, I learned so much technical wise, so much about crew chief's role, so much about your background, and I just have 30 more questions to ask you now.
Seriously, me too.
Maybe go ahead. Just go ahead. I got nothing but time.
We'll bring you on another episode and we'll have another round two, but it's just so fascinating to hear about something that typically isn't covered on the broadcast, typically isn't covered in the media. It's just kind of really interesting stories and perspectives from someone that's deep inside the sport that knows a lot about what's going on. So thank you so much for coming on again. Really appreciated it.
Absolutely, guys. I appreciate you. Anytime you need anything, just call and ask or walk down to my office.
I'll fly down.
All right, fly down.